very much because you accepted to have this interview.
Oh, no problem at all. My pleasure.
I'm sure you heard many times this kind of questions, but that means that you already have a prepared answer.
Let's hope so.
Yeah. So first of it, how did it happen to jump from children's books to serial killer crime novels and then to novels with, let's say, extreme violence against children or youngsters?
Well, in the beginning, my children's books were humor based, and I had written 5 books, and I was just very, very tired of being funny. And when I switched to, and I actually, when I stopped writing children's books, I thought I wouldn't write anymore. I was just fine. I thought this is good. I'm just stopping now. But then I got the urge to write again, and this time I wanted to write for like a grown-up audience. And it was actually very easy to choose the kind of book I would want to write, because these kind of books are the books that I like to read. And I think that is what most authors do, is to write the book that they would like to be reading. So I've always been a very big fan of crime and horror. So it was sort of obvious that I would write this genre.
So after 6 novels with Tora, what made you start a different series with 2 quite different main characters?
Yeah, it's again, like I wrote the 5 children's books, then I write these 5 about Tora, and I just seem to have the patience for 5 to 6 books in a series, or then I have to change, because I don't feel enthusiastic about the series anymore, and I don't think it's fair to the reader to write something that I don't want to be writing. It's I think also when you write a series about a character that kind of develops, that has a life that changes through the books, then there is a limit to how many books you can write about these characters. It's different if you're writing about a character who is always the same, like Hercule Poirot, Jack Reacher. And I'm not saying that one is better than the other at all. It's just different, and I think it's harder to maintain enthusiasm about a series where you have to keep changing the character. I think I would probably have written more books about these characters if they had just been able to stay always exactly the same as in the first book.
What about the readers? Did they complain about that?
Not really, no. I have had a lot of requests to bring Thora back and so on, and the series that the Huldar and Freyja series, I'm still I just finished the last book of that last year, so maybe I'll get, in the future I'll get requests for that, but I'm not going back. It's like I say, books are not cheap. You have to be enthusiastic and try to write a good book every time, and it's never going to be good if you don't feel like writing it as the author, I think.
Now this question crossed my mind. Did you ever thought about crossover between Tora and Freyja and Huldar?
Possibly, maybe. Not a whole book, but maybe like a short story or something. Yes, that could be interesting. Actually, that could be interesting. They would not be friends. Absolutely not. They'd be working with 2 teams. Yeah.
Maybe she'll defend a criminal or something like that.
Exactly, yes. Yeah.
All right. What or who inspired you to create Freyja and Huldar?
It was, I had written in between stopping the Thora series, I wrote some standalones, so I had a lot of time to kind of think about what the series that I was going to write next would be about. So I did put a lot of effort into those 2 characters. I wanted to try writing about a police, like a police procedural, but I wasn't interested in having it only the police. So so that is where Freyja sort of comes into the question. She's, and I'm also interested in the psychological angle of the crime, not just, you know, how you take a fingerprint and so on. And I think it gives the books added depth, I think, to have someone who's not just collecting evidence and so on, and understands how the mind works more than the physical part of a crime investigation.
Are they inspired by real people or some characters that you liked in other books?
I think, yeah, I mean, most of my characters have something from someone that I've met through the years. They're like a jigsaw puzzle made of pieces from various people. But I think of all the characters I've written, I like Huldar the best. I mean, I'm a woman, but if I was a man, I would be Huldar. Totally, you know, relaxed about everything, and I just like writing about him a lot, even though he's not a perfect person in any way, but he's just he has sort of traits that I would admire, even though they make life difficult for those around him.
Did you put something from you in him?
Maybe, maybe. But I'm not like, I'm very, the thing is, I shouldn't have said admire, I should have said envy. I envy people who can be totally relaxed about, you know, how they are affecting their wider environment. But he does get better at that. Through the series, he becomes a more empathetic person, I guess, yeah.
I saw he is really engaged in these cases and he really cares about them.
Yeah, yeah. And I think, or I hope that is the case for most detectives that are working on murder cases. I think that's probably a pretty realistic sort of assumption to make, that they do care about trying to find care about the victim and try to care about the victims' families and so on, to try to find some sort of solution so that, I don't know, life can go on, I guess.
And also not to, let's say, not punish the criminals, but just to pay it back. Yeah, to bring justice.
Yeah, because I think it would probably be, I mean, it's horrible to have, I mean, I don't know anyone who has been murdered, but I imagine it would be horrible to lose someone to murder, and to make it even worse if you never know who did it and there's no justice in the end. It's going to be sad always, but that would make it a little less difficult, I think.
Or to see the criminals walk free, unpunished, or they didn't get what they deserved.
Yes, exactly.
I remember a scene in the second book, that one with the pedophilia cases and so on. When, but now I think I will give a spoiler or something like that. I remember the cigarette, when he put the cigarette in the one of the suspects' eye.
And that that book is very angry, and the reason it is very angry is that this case that I make up in a way, it's based on an actual real case that happened when I was a kid. And in that case, it was a little girl who the system just totally, you know, it just didn't help her because she had links to there was politicians in her family, and this little girl trying to protect her sister. It was just, you know, it was the worst. Nobody was killed, but it was just so awful. And that went to the court, and it was also the judge had been the friend of the mayor. I mean, it was just ridiculous. And I was just so angry because that horrible person never got any judgment or anything. So this was me sort of judging this person. So it was me putting the cigarette out in the eye of this person in a way, on the page, you know.
Of course.
I'm very angry when horrible people get away with doing things to children that the most innocent in our society, and that's why that book is very angry. It was me being angry.
So they did really cover it up, or try to cover it up?
Yeah. It was awful. It was just awful. Today this wouldn't happen, but this is a long time ago. I was a kid, but there's been lots of research into this case because of how awful it was for this little. And this woman who's now a grown up, she was chosen about 10 years ago the Woman of the Year in Iceland because she came forward to help other people that have been through similar kind of thing.
I remember a similar case when you described in the first book, in The Legacy, the mother of the children that they were split after that.
Yeah.
It was also an incest.
Yes. Yeah.
There.
Yeah. A lot of the things in my books are based on something out of reality here, like out of our society here. But I usually take something horrible and then I make it like a lot worse, make it even more horrible. But the seed for, especially for this series, this Huldar and Freyja series, every single book has something in it that has actually happened, and then I'm sort of making it more dramatic in a way. I mean, all of these things have been dramatic, but I'm making them more elaborate, adding more layers, I guess you'd say.
I asked you before about Huldar and Freyja, but how about the other characters, also very important ones? Let's say Baldur, Freyja's brother, or Erla, or Gudlaugur.
Yeah. Yes, it's Atla. I read a lot before I wrote that book. I read like lots of things about the Icelandic police force, talked to people and so on. And there was this, they had done this psychological study on women in the Icelandic police force. How it was to be a woman in the police force. And because at the time when I started writing the series, there were only like 13% of all cops were women, which is unusual for Iceland to have such a low participation rate of females. And these women, I mean, it's different today because it's like now almost, 10 years ago, then you have a higher percentage of women and it becomes like a more normal environment. But it was a very, very macho environment. And some of the women started to try to be like the guys, to fit in. They would do all this cursing and be, try to be like some sort of female man edition or something. So that's what Atla is supposed to be. She's a woman who is sort of fighting her way in a very macho environment. Guðlaugur, I added Guðlaugur when I realized that I had written so many books and there wasn't a single, maybe there was one character before that had been a gay character. I just had not thought to include anyone who was gay, and I was so surprised at myself at being so incredibly closed-minded, because I know, like everybody, I know lots of gay people, and I just hadn't thought because I'm so stuck in my world, I guess. So that was sort of to try to have a gay character in the book. So yeah, and but not that it's like a huge issue in the book or anything. But it was just my attempt to try to make the character setting or the character gallery more realistic. Because in Iceland you can't take 20 people and have no. I mean, if you take at random 20 people, there's going to be somebody who is not heterosexual for sure.
Now in 2020, it would be impossible not to have a gay character.
Yeah, I think so, and I was so disappointed with myself when I realized that I had, been so naive, or I don't know what it was, just old-fashioned, I guess. So, yeah, I wanted to fix that. But that being said, I've written books where there are people who are handicapped and so on, and I believe that in a crime novel, to be to be what would be the word, inclusive, then these characters can also have horrible things happen to them. In a crime book, you don't put a character in just for show and have everything nice happen to that one character. You have to be, do it in a realistic manner, and nobody really wants to be in a crime book. I wouldn't want to be in my books for sure.
So Freyja has a brother in jail, and they had a difficult childhood.
Yeah.
Both orphans with religious upbringing and so on. This upbringing influenced them a lot.
Yeah.
Are these the reasons he got in jail? Let's say, I mean Baldur. And she can have a serious relationship, and she's difficult to cope it up.
Was the question if it has to do with their
yes, with their past and what happened in their past?
Yeah, like with her brother, part of his problem would be that it's never said basically in the book, but their mother had a drinking problem. She was not a stable person, so Baldur has inherited this alcoholic gene, I guess. And this risk gene, which is to not think about what's going to happen. We have, I've known characters like this, and it usually ends pretty bad. That they don't make, like most of us, we try to stay away from doing something that we know might end really, really badly, especially when it comes to breaking the law. But there are characters who just somehow don't think about it, and of course they end up then in jail. And that's his story. That's his story.
I think you said it in the first volume in The Legacy. You told their mother's story, including how she died.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, because she liked to go to parties and drink, and someday they just found her dead.
Yeah.
And then you told the Freyja story.
Yeah. And Freyja is the opposite. She's grown up, and I think children that have such a difficult childhood or traumatic childhood, they will turn out, some of them will turn out okay, some will turn out different, but it will in some way affect their personality. Be it like Freyja, who always wants to be on top of things and have nothing go wrong, and a little bit cold because she's afraid of getting burnt. And then Baldur, who is just totally relaxed, or not relaxed, just reckless. Reckless would be the word.
Yeah, reckless. Yeah. Also, Huldar had a not difficult childhood, but with some issues, let's say, with his sisters and...
Yeah. So Huldar, his backstory is that he grew up the only brother of 7 siblings. So he had 6 older sisters, and he was the youngest. And he's just he doesn't want any emails in his life. But he's also, he wants to have girlfriends, but he doesn't want to have a relationship where there's a female living in his house, because he's just had it up to here with women telling him what to do and so on. So that's sort of maybe like a more comical backstory than for example, with Freyja.
So that's when Jonas steps in.
Yes, yes, yeah.
Although he will regret it later.
Yeah, exactly.
A lot. Every book he will regret it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Everybody admires the Huldar and Freyja cases' complexity. The fact that they are so twisted, but also for being so actual, let's say, for the society, like adoptions, pedophilia, child molestation, the cover-up for that case, the bullying, let's say, in the 3rd novel. Yeah, not just between kids and young persons, of course, but also between the adults. Do you intend to make these cases so difficult to solve?
Yeah, I like that. When I'm writing, I like to, in the beginning, when I get an idea for a book, like for example, let's say the bullying book, there was an interview with the mother of the youngest child in Iceland that had ever committed suicide. And I don't remember exactly how old he was. He was somewhere 8 to 11, I'm not sure. But he had committed suicide because he was being bullied. And that just made me think like, oh, this is horrific. And then I wanted to address that topic. And then you have to find a way of making it interesting. And that's not enough just to have, I could have written a book where somebody goes around killing bullies and there's, they just find one after the other, but you need a little bit more. You need to twist it a little bit. I do. Otherwise, I don't find it interesting enough to write it. So I have to think out like a more complex story around sort of why the murder is done, how it's done, and so on. And that's just the way I like it. That's also why I find writing short stories extremely difficult, because there is no space for that type of
to develop it.
Plot, yeah. So my short.
I have to confess that in the first volume, in the Legacy, I had no idea who the killer might be.
Yeah, it's yeah. No, it's
It came like such a big surprise that he's the killer.
Yeah. No, it's that's what you try to do, but and hopefully it works more often than it doesn't. Sometimes the trick is to not. I didn't use it in that book, but sometimes the trick is to allow the reader to put something in that it looks like you're trying to hide some little bit of the whole puzzle, and allow the reader to figure that out, and then they will not be as aware of the other things that you're putting in and trying to kind of hide. So sometimes people will realize part of the plot, but very, very seldom will they realize the whole extent of it.
Didn't have the chance to address a question actually, because in the second novel, I guessed, let's say almost from the beginning, or maybe my mind wanted to think that is the killer, that one is the killer. But in the third volume, only after I started to check my translation, I got the whole puzzle. Do you want to put the readers to their mind to start to check and gather the information and to solve it again with the police?
I want the reader to be confident that in the end there will be a solution that's not space aliens, or something completely ridiculous. So if they want to, when I read a crime novel by other authors, it depends on the book a little bit. If I'm constantly trying to think who did it, or how could they have done it. But I do find it's different with, like when I watch movies, I almost always figure out the story in crime movies, because after I learned how expensive every second is. So if somebody says, oh, this is a nice teacup, okay, then that teacup is very important, because otherwise they would have edited it out of the movie. So there you can see I'm very good at figuring out when things are being said or done that must have a reason to it, then I guess. But when I'm reading a book, I think I'm more just enjoying the story to be constantly trying to figure it out, but it does happen.
These novels are quite violent, especially the murders. First of all, are there in Iceland such kind of criminals?
There are. Violence is on the rise in Iceland, for sure. The types of murders are probably more violent than they used to be. However, murder is always violent. There's no killing of someone with a kiss. It's done, especially here when there are no or few guns. So people are killed in pretty traumatic manners. That series, I mean, the first in that series was my 10th crime novel, and I just wanted to write. I was just tired of drowning and stabbing and you know that, and I wanted to do something else. So that's sort of the explanation for how those murders are kind of bizarre. In the second book, I was so angry, and also in the third book, I was angry, I guess. But in the fourth book, I started to think, okay, where am I going with this? Am I going to write always increasingly more violent murders, and where will I end up? So I sort of took a step back to try to tone down the violence. Like that, I made that decision. I don't want to be always more and more violent and end up being in, I don't know, some sort of torture porn writer. Or so I did tone it down a bit on purpose. Because it's tough if everyone expects you to constantly be more violent than the next book, and that's just going to end really badly. So now they're not as violent.
And how much is fiction and how much is reality?
I mean, nobody has killed anyone with a vacuum cleaner. I don't think so. So that's not.
Or a hair.
Like
How's it called?
No. Nobody. I don't think anybody has done that, and I hope nobody ever does. But so that's just made up. That's all in my head. But beating someone to death, that's reality. That's common, I guess. And yeah, so no, there's no reality. And I mean, most murders in Iceland are sort of they happen in the moment. You know, it's not someone who's plotted and planned. It does happen, but it happens seldom. So usually it's two drunk or drugged people having an argument in a kitchen, and then they take up a knife and then they stab the other. One stabs the other one, or something. That type of murder. So, but what I try to do is, I know I'm not writing about murders that have happened exactly the way that I'm describing them, but I try to write them in a way that they could have happened. You know, it's not, they're realistic it hasn't happened, but given the wrong people at the wrong time, under the wrong situation, then this could possibly happen.
I understand. When you start a new series, do you have a specific number in mind of novels?
Yeah, I did actually. I didn't have a specific number in mind for the Thora series, but I did have a specific number in mind for the Huldar and Freyja series, and that was 6 books. And I actually think I could have written one more. It would have been okay, but I decided this is what I promised, and that's what I'm going to stick to. So I just finished now a horror novel that's coming out next week, I think, in Iceland, the 13th of November. And then next year, I'll probably publish the first of a new series. So I really need to start thinking now a lot about the main character for that. And then I also actually this year, tomorrow is I just wrote another children's book, and that's coming out tomorrow here in Iceland. That was really fun to write, and quite funny actually to be writing at the same time a humorous kids book and a horror novel. I was jumping from one to the other, you know, people dying, awful things, and then jumping to something totally humorous and friendly. And that it was good. It was actually good to do it together.
It wasn't difficult to change the atmosphere from one to the other one.
No, it was. I think it was good. It was good to do it that way. Yeah, and probably because it gives you sort of a breathing space and relaxed. So I think that one will. It's been trial read by kids, and it's funny. It's funny. So I'm very enthusiastic to see how that one will be received, because it's been so long since I wrote for kids. Now it's the kids who read my kids' books who would be buying it for their kids. It's that long ago. Well, almost.
So it wasn't like let's write some adventures for the kids and then jump to let's murder some people.
It was
In the
almost.
other end.
It was. That's exactly what it was.
Right. So if you have to choose a favorite novel, which is that one and why? I have my favorite, but I want to listen to you first.
It would probably be I Remember You, the ghost story, because that one, it was, yeah, there was some, I like horror. I like reading horror, and I like that one. And I also like the first Huldar and Freyja. So yeah, it would be these two, I think.
So in Freyja and Huldar, it's the legacy, the first one.
Yes, or the second one. I'm not sure. First or the second, I think.
I think you said in an interview, I think it's the second one. That is also my favorite.
Yeah. And it's probably the second one. That is actually more fun. Yes, I agree. The second one. Yeah.
And why is that?
I think it was really fun to write. It was also a really good feeling to get this anger at this old case somehow on the page. That made me. It was a good feeling somehow. It was. It's not justice, but it's something. I like that.
Do you think that life in general it's as complicated as the relationship between Freyja and Huldar?
I think so. I think it's probably getting more and more complicated. It's definitely more complicated to be a young person today than when I was a young person, with all this social media and all of these cameras and photos. And oh my God, I am so happy nobody had a camera to take photos all over the place when I was young. That would have been just horrific. But I do think there's more pressure on people to be somehow everywhere, be always really good looking, own all kinds of stuff. That wasn't when I was growing up. So I do think, yes, it's more difficult. But in some ways, there are things that are easier, and the playing field in the world is probably becoming more even. And so there are pluses and minuses. I think the only thing that you can be sure of is that it's never going to stay the same. And each generation will look back and think, oh, it was so great when I was young. And then the generation with all the selfies and all this will look back, at this and think it's easier. So things change, and you just have to adapt and try to somehow, make the best of your life and chances and opportunities in wherever you are. But I do think things are getting more difficult, in my opinion, at least.
I remember you put the Snapchat application in the third novel.
Yeah.
When they transmitted the videos with the youngsters being killed and so on. I brought this idea a few questions about in the legacy. Do you think that past influences the present?
Some of it, yes, and some of it, no. I think like when people say, we have to keep learning history because history, we have to learn from history. I haven't seen anybody learn anything from history. We keep making the same mistakes over and over and over again, humanity. So in some ways it does, in some ways it doesn't. But I do think that in the world that I create within the books, then part of it, and part of also like the appeal of horror and ghost stories is that the past will come and seek out what do you call it, justice, I guess, which is not the case always, of course.
Because I saw many characters in your books just repeat their parents' mistakes. They were mistaken, or some crimes were committed against them, and then they just repeat these mistakes.
Yeah, and I think that's also a part of. I mean, here in Iceland, we have a really strong social system to try to catch children that are, have parents that are not doing a good job at being parents and so on. But somehow these children very often don't somehow have the same opportunities as other children. So as a society, even though we are trying our best, we're not really doing a very good job at this. And that makes me worry. So if you have, for example, a child that grows up with two drug addicts, that child is not going to have the same chances and opportunities as someone who grows up in a more stable household. And that's extremely sad, I find. And I think that all of us here would like to have some sort of system that would catch these children and help them and fill in the gaps that these parents are leaving behind. But that seems to be very difficult and probably not achievable 100% ever.
Speaking of that, is there children's house in Iceland?
Yes, that's an actual thing. Yes, and that was one of the, I had read about that, and that was one of the, when I was planning this new series, when it was new, and that was absolutely one of the things that I wanted to include, because I find it so fascinating, and it's such a good, it's a really good institution, and it really helps children who are usually victims. I mean, that's the most common thing, that they are victims of abuse, and it spares them the added trauma of having to go to the police, to a court, and so on. So I really like that concept, and also the concept of witnesses, because witnesses are the worst evidence. I mean, you have two people, they'll never describe the thing the same, and much less if they are children who are very susceptible to trying to please the adult and tell the adult what they think the adult hear. So I found that a very interesting thing to bring into the series, but then I also thought that I didn't want every single book to be them interviewing a child at the children's house, because I thought that would be too repetitive. So Freyja's position, sort of the way she works with the police, changes throughout the books to make it more, it wouldn't be the same thing over and over again.
I would like, if you agree, of course, to ask you a final question.
Yes.
You are named the Queen of Icelandic crime fiction. How does this name make you feel?
Well, it's it would probably make me feel like very, very proud if I didn't get it. I got it immediately when the first crime book came out in Iceland. And it was kind of funny because I was the only woman writing crime novels. So it was just so obvious, I was the queen because there was nobody else. So it's a bit funny, but it is, I'm still the crime novelist female that sells the most here, I guess, and I probably the most popular as a result. But it's a bit funny because we don't have kings and queens here, so it's just it's okay. It's okay. But I don't feel like a queen at all.
But anyway, the queen is only one.
Yeah. But at some point someone will have to take over. I can't be this queen forever. So we'll see.
To take the crown.
Yes.
All right then. Thank you very much for accepting this interview. And
this has been really interesting and very good questions. And if I could just say hi and give my very best regards to all of the readers in Romania and then to everyone in Romania. And here's hoping that this strange COVID thing will be over soon for all of us and that we can go back to having some sort of normal life.